are on another beautiful day in my backyard with Jenna and Jody. And we're here at Robin Hood Park today with Brian Matson, who's a longtime resident of Keene, and many of you may know him already. We're going to be talking a little bit about the history of this area, of Robin Hood, about George Wheelock, who many of you may not know was the person that donated much of this land that we have up here at Robin Hood. So, welcome, Brian. It's good to have you here today. Yeah. Excellent. So, why don't you start us off a little bit? What do you know about Robin Hood Park? What's one of your thoughts or stories?
Well, Robin Hood Park is just an incredibly popular park. It's our wooded park. There's two main parks in Keene. Wheelock Park, named after George Wheelock, he donated that also. And Robin Hood Park. Wheelock Park is a facility park. It has the ball fields, the tennis courts, and the horseshoe courts. Robin Hood Park is more of a natural area. It's mostly forest. There are a lot of trails. There are a lot of things to see. George Wheelock had found boulders in the park that he had given different names because he had seen different shapes within it. You have the pond, which is called the Res, or the reservoir. It's nice to walk around, but it gives you the water life, and there are ducks that come here, and there are kids that fish here. There's a fishing derby. There is a small playground. We have play equipment. The amphitheater here, where there have been music concerts over the years. And then there's the history that's behind all of it, and what it's been like. And George Wheelock loved this area. He spent a lot of time here, and he wanted it to look the way it does now. He couldn't wait for the pines to grow. I've seen some pictures of Robin Hood Park in the early years, and it was very small, stubs.
Well, when did he buy the land?
I'm not sure when he bought it. He was born in 1816, I believe.
I think it was, yep.
And I think he came back to Keene in the 1830s with a law practice. And I would suspect sometime between the late 1830s and 1880
Was when he acquired the land.
He purchased the land. And
so it looked very different. I mean, these trees were a lot younger or not here at all.
very much so.
Yeah, and when you think of Keene, there's a lot of trees that weren't here at that time. I mean, it seems like most of the trees were just gone then. They had a lot of the sheep and different things
that
were
there
around.
had been a lot of logging.
Farming.
Yeah.
And he would come into the forest, and he was culling out, trying to speed things up. You know, the early growth will generally be your birches and your poplars, and he was cutting those out and taking them, just anything he could do to
those bigger trees.
increase. And he's got what he wanted.
Yeah.
It's here now.
Yeah.
It's the big white pines and the red oak.
Yeah, and he actually planted some of the trees in the area. I don't know if they're going to be still here, but he actually went around and planted certain trees in different areas.
Here.
Yeah, there's a story that I heard about that he went to somebody's house one day because he saw a tree that had been taken out of the park, and he saw it in their yard. So he waited until like the spring when the tree was still okay, and went up to them and said, you know, I think you've got my tree, and he had them bring it back, and so he replanted it here at Robin Hood Park. Yeah.
Oh, there's another story, and I'm not sure exactly. You'll have to fill me in, but there's this is where I've heard a lot of kids talk about Sunset Rock, and that's up here in Robin Hood. Now tell us a little bit about that rock. Who named it? Was it George Wheelock that named it, we think?
Quite possibly, or just the locals, because back then, with the height of the trees so low, on Sunset Rock, you could see the sun set over West Keene.
Okay, now you
over
can,
the
of
hills.
course,
You
but
cannot now, because it's all grown in. So it got its name Sunset Rock. A lot of people will say Sunset Rock and refer to what is also known as the ledges on Beach Hill, further to our south.
Confusion.
And
That's not
the
Sunset
real Sunset Rock is here in Robin Hood. It's just that now the sun sets over the tops of the trees much earlier.
Right.
But it was a favorite place for people to go. There was a road that came in on the back of the park by coming off here of Roxbury Road, and people in the beginning could go up there with horse-drawn carriages and so on and so forth, and picnic on the weekends. On Sundays, those were popular things for people to do. And it stayed open and accessible through that road for many, many years. And then when it seemed to have changed is in about the 1940s, when teenagers began to get the use of a family car and started going up there Friday evenings maybe and Saturday evenings, and there were some messes left behind.
Yeah.
And they eventually, they gated it off, and they said no more vehicle access, just maintenance.
Okay, so now we can walk to it.
Yes.
And speaking of that, I wonder, while you guys are talking, maybe I'll walk to Sunset Rock.
Yeah, that sounds like a great idea.
Yeah,
yeah.
All right,
Perfect.
well then I'll see you guys in a little while.
Okay,
Awesome.
cool. I can't wait.
Bye.
Yeah. So Brian, I have so many great memories of this place. I've lived in Keene most of my life, and I've always loved being outside. I remember there used to be like goldfish in the pond.
Well, yes.
I mean, not that we want to have goldfish, but there were.
They had been in the pond in front of the recreation center on Washington Street, and it was drained one year. And the people draining it said, well, let's put the fish in Robin Hood, not knowing that it's really a carp.
Right.
And we shouldn't have put them up here, but it happened.
Yeah.
So they're still here.
Yeah. And I remember fishing derbies.
Still.
And ice skating.
Still.
Yep. The pool out at Wheelock and Robin Hood.
Right.
Tour, walking around. Actually, I only walked around Robin Hood just about a year or two ago. I had never walked around the pond. And it's just amazing to see all of the things that we have because of George Wheelock.
That's right.
Yeah.
And there was a period of time that there was swimming in the pond. There was a bathhouse, there was a diving board, and there was a raft.
Wow.
They had ropes across, and on the other side of the ropes were rowboats, and people could rent the rowboats and paddle around.
Yeah.
But what happened was in the testing of the water, I think the state's testing got more and more stringent,
Right.
and also there was a lot more construction going on in the watershed up here behind it, and it got to the point where the water wasn't acceptable for swimming, and so then they closed it to swimming, and for a while they bused children in the summertime down to Swansea Lake, but eventually the Lions Club decided we need a swimming pool there and one in Wheelock, so they built one on each side of town.
Yep.
And it was built in 1963 and opened in 1964.
Yeah.
And they've been very popular ever since.
Yeah, because I have memories of going out to Wheelock Park quite a bit and spending all my days at the pool in the summer and playing ball out in the fields. I'm sure a lot of you folks have played softball, and you have this park because of George Wheelock.
That's right.
Yeah.
This area that we're standing in was actually a water supply. It was the little reservoir that they built to hold the water that was sent right down into Keene. And eventually they realized they needed to fill it in, and they put a big tank in across the road.
Yes. Yep.
As everything progressed and how you took care of your drinking water. But they filled it in to become an amphitheater, and then I think it was around 1960 or early 60s, the concrete slab was built here and electricity brought in, and we've had music concerts here. The playgrounds have come up here and put on performances over the years. And then before you could rent movies, we used to show movies here on Wednesday nights.
I remember, yeah.
And it was the old type projectors we'd set up over here.
Yeah.
And I remember filling this place, especially it was the Muppet movie. The year after it had come out, it had already been in the theaters once.
But this is Keene.
And this place was, right, this place was mobbed that night and filled. And those were exciting times, fun times.
Yeah.
So this is a great little thing here. The only problem it has is that the parking isn't all that great. You do get some noise from trucks, and it's a little more difficult for older people to get to.
Right.
It's not easily accessible, but it's been here and been used for many, many years.
Yeah. I think one of my first memories of Robin Hood Park was to be able to go to that place that was up in Keene somewhere. I didn't know where it was, but to be able to look out over Keene.
Oh, yes.
And the view, I don't know, I think it's grown up a little bit now, and it seems like there's more trees. Maybe it was because I was younger, but it just seemed like you could see forever when I was younger.
The trees have grown.
Yeah.
It is a great place to come to if you wanted to watch fireworks on 4th, because you can look right across to West Keene.
Yeah.
But no, the view is always been beautiful up here.
Yeah.
And it's a quiet area, and the park reaches all the way from here to North Lincoln Street and comes out behind Northeast Division Cemetery
Right.
up near the chapel.
Right. And actually, it comes out just about across from George Wheelock's gravesite.
He's buried across from Robin Hood Forest.
Yes.
These
Yep.
stone faces,
Yep.
and there's a small boulder on his gravesite that's one of the Ascutney boulders.
Yes.
And he was the one who actually discovered or proved that the big boulders that sit around this park are boulders that came from the top of Mount Ascutney.
Right, which is
And the
hard to
glacier
believe.
pulled
I
them
mean,
through, dropped them.
Ascutney is almost an hour away.
I think it's 35, 70 miles.
Yeah.
You're right.
Yeah, it's a long ways to think of boulders, you know, landing this far.
But he researched that and made that determination.
Right.
And everybody, other experts said, you're right.
Yeah, yeah. I think he was just a really amazing person that really had foresight to,
He did.
you know, what we need to have for the future and what people need to be. Because really, being outside is something that everybody can do. It doesn't take much. It's a matter of what you want to do. That's why the Monadnock region is such a great place to be, because you've got parks like this. And, you know, there's a lot of other parks that are located in Keene. You know, if you like to go hiking, you can go on a flat hike right around the reservoir.
And the fishing derby every year, they don't catch all the fish. So the kids can fish there all summer long.
Yeah.
And here they are, you know, they're right here where you can see the kids and they're fishing. They can bike up here. It's perfectly safe to fish.
And it's doing the things that we grew up doing.
Right.
That I know kids may not feel like it's a really exciting thing to do, but once you get out and you learn how to fish, or you know about hiking, or you know what to look for, if you look up, you might see things up in the trees, or you might see things along the ground. We look for mushrooms or scat or different kinds of trees. I mean, that's what these parks are all about.
In this park, the boulders, a lot of them are flopped over each other, against each other, and they make openings that the kids have always called caves. They're not really deep.
Right.
But it looks like a cave if you're 11 years old.
Yeah.
And for years, as I've gone through the park when I was working for the recreation department, every summer there were kids, they go and they get all of the branches and they block it off, and they build their little camps and their little forts, and it's just a great place for kids to play.
Yeah, it
and
really
then
is.
those would rot, and then another crew would come in in 2 years and they'd build it again.
Yeah, I saw one down by the tennis court last year, actually.
Yeah.
And I thought, I wonder what's going on here. But it's really interesting to see all the things that you can do to explore in this area. It's pretty much endless.
There was a religious group called the Millerites in Keene, and they had determined that in 1843 it was going to be the end of the world. And in that year, on a particular date, I think it was in October, they went to the hillsides, and in particular, a large group went to Sunset Rock. And there they waited to watch for the end of the world, and it didn't happen. And
luckily,
they walked back into town the next day, just, I guess, telling everybody we calculated wrong.
Yeah.
But that's where the Millerites gathered.
Yeah.
So Sunset Rock has a history. People have gone there forever.
Yeah.
And there's the carving that's up there of the dog. That's been there for years, and a lot of people have questioned why or what is that part of the carving that is around the neck. And a gentleman, Bob Sherwin, who walked this forest every inch, talked with a man up there one day and found out that he had carved that, and that had been his dog, who had since passed away. And that thing around his neck was a little light that he had made, a little battery controlled it way back when this was pretty clever to do.
Yeah.
So that when he walked with his dog at night, he could always see where his dog was. He could see the light moving around on the collar.
Yeah.
And he commemorated his dog by carving it in up there on the rock. So another piece of history.
Yeah, and from what I understand, there's a lot of rocks up there that have carvings in them, or I think George had made some kind of, it looked like a chimney almost, with a whole bunch of rocks. It took him a couple of years to build, and I believe there's still a stack of rocks that are the remnants of that.
There are some left. And he had carved Robin Hood on a rock. At that back entrance I talked about, the road that comes in the back of the park.
Yeah.
As you get up in there, there's a little V in the roads, and right there sits a rock with Robin Hood carved in it, and he carved that.
Yeah. Just again, an amazing guy. I mean, this is the 1800s.
Right.
You know, and now here we are in the 2000s, and we're enjoying everything that he.
It was 1889. He donated Children's Woods, which was right over here, on this side of the amphitheater.
Yeah, and that was
to the north,
like 15 or 18 acres or so, just
right.
a small portion of what Robin Hood is now.
Because the section down by the tennis courts was called City Park.
Ah.
The city owned that and had used it as a park. So he combined that with it, and then in 1897 he donated all the acreage in the forest.
Yep. Yep.
And then sometime around that time he had donated Wheelock Park. He was named the first park commissioner.
Yeah,
which was actually a smart move.
Yeah.
And he paid attention to everything.
Yeah.
Even in Wheelock Park, he tried to create an arboretum.
Right.
But as he wrote in one of his reports about the cursed pines that keep taking over.
Right. And
Look
that
at Wheelock
acid soil.
now.
Oh, I know. They're everywhere. And that was, what was it? It was called it wasn't the campground. It was called the fairgrounds. Did they?
That was the fairgrounds originally.
And so what did they do? Do you know what they did when it was a fairgrounds? Did they have like the fair like what we have at Cheshire Fair?
Yeah.
That's what they had out there then?
Yeah. And we had what we call the old playground building that you used to go to your playground program in, a wooden building in Wheelock Park, and we built a new one. And we were going to tear down the old one, and then we had it inspected, these people from the historical committee, and they said, well, let's check it out. So we did. We had a person come in who was an expert on it and determined that no, this was probably a building built in the 1850s or 40s, the way it was built, and probably was one of the early exhibit halls for the fairgrounds.
I'll bet. I never would have thought of that.
And right near there, again, Bob Sherwin, who I mentioned had wandered here, also had walked around out there, had found just over behind it, on the edge of the woods and the swamp, huge granite posts with a ring in it, which would have been where they would have tied up oxen or big horses or whatever for the fair.
Yeah.
And there they still sit over there. So there's little pieces of history everywhere here.
Yeah, it's really interesting. So if you get a chance to enjoy coming up to Robin Hood, it's not far out of Keene. I think it's 0.7 miles from the center of Keene. So it's not a hard place to get to, and I really think that you should think about making a visit. Another thing that just came to mind that George had something to do with too is the common in Keene. That common wasn't always blocked off, and it wasn't always all these trees. It was just a circle. And he actually had something to do with, blocking it off, putting in the trees and making it into a real center, a real common. Because I believe I've seen pictures that they used to bring their sheep in.
Oh, yes.
Yep, and all the farmers. It's amazing because when you think of Keene, you don't think of farms, but there was a lot of farms in this area. And I even remember when I was very young, still having horses in the streets. I know it sounds weird, but there was somebody that would come to town in a wagon. I don't know who it was, but I remember this. And where there's a bank, it's now Ocean Bank, I think, and there was a homestead there, and they had horses right in downtown Keene. So it didn't take much to get out and have the farms all up in the Washington Street area, Court Street area, where the wreck was, all farm properties.
There's a huge stone slab in Ashwellet River Park, and it was donated by Bruce Wixon. And he got the stone because he did a lot of demolition of old barns. One of the barns he was hired to demolish was out on West Street, going out West Street from the square, just past the bypass. On the right, there was a barn out back, and the slab has a ring in it. So, I mean, obviously there was another farm and barn that was right in close on West Street, right near what is a very busy area now. And that slab sits in Ashwellet River Park now and is used.
It's
on
just,
and goes.
It does. And the history of Keene, that's what I'm really enjoying learning about as I talk with people that have been here for a while or that know stories like you might. from working with the different parks in the area. Just the history that we have in Keene, and again, how lucky we are to have all these little parks. There's one off George Street in that little area there. There's a little tennis court down there.
Ellis Harrison.
Ellis, yeah. What other parks am I forgetting?
Pocket parks?
Yeah.
Well, Hickey Desolate Park on the corner of Island and Winchester Street.
Oh, yep, yep.
And there's Shadow Lake out on Kendall Road.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I used to live out there, and I never knew that was what it was called. Wow.
We now, the city owns a little small piece.
Yeah, around the pond?
Near Bent's Ice Pond.
Oh, yes, yeah.
Which is called Wilson Pond, but they called it Bent's Ice Pond because Mr. Bent took the ice from it, and part of the property that the city owns is the old foundation for his ice house.
Yep, right off Arch Street. Right, you can see it right from the road.
Yeah,
yep.
And they also did that up here in Robin Hood years and years ago. They would take ice from the pond in the winter.
And did they have an ice house up here?
I'm not sure where this ice went. It might have gone downtown to some building downtown.
Yeah.
And then, we're talking about this park and the trees and the trails and everything, but a lot of use is given this park in the wintertime for the skating, because it is just gorgeous.
Right.
You have the snow hanging on the trees, and the city cleans the ice off.
Right.
And we do flood it. It's a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
But, and it's a beautiful place. The lights are on till 10 o'clock at night.
And music, and sometimes there's music.
We've done that. We used to do that.
Yeah. So, this is a facility where you can come here year-round.
Absolutely.
And really enjoy yourself. And it doesn't cost much. It's a great family activity. Or if you just want some solitude, you can come up, and it's usually pretty quiet.
I'll tell you that what used to surprise me is occasionally I'd have to go out into the park for some reason, following a snowstorm, say, 1-2 inches of snow, enough to leave tracks. And say it was 10:30 in the morning, 11 o'clock, I'm walking up into an area here at Robin Hood. You would be so surprised at how many tracks you're seeing.
Yeah.
You begin to realize how many people have already gone for a walk in this area.
Yeah.
And you see dog tracks, they have their dog with them, and then you do sometimes see tracks with the wildlife that this provides for.
Yeah. Are there a lot of deer in this area, or turkeys? Have you ever seen anything
there are
in particular?
Deer further down, because they go over into the wetland at the cemetery.
Right, yeah.
On the other side of the chapel. And to our south on Beach Hill, there's a lot of wildlife there. And it affords the wildlife an opportunity to cross and come down into town. And with the wetland at the cemetery to track some there. A lot of birds. I've walked in the cemetery many times, and you can hear the woodpecker over in Robin Hood Forest early in the morning when it's quiet, and he's just pounding away. And it just echoes all around the area, so it's beautiful.
It is. We saw a couple of ducks flying through this morning, and one of the things that always reminds me of Robin Hood too in this area is the peepers. In the spring, that's all you hear at night is all those peepers between Robin Hood and the cemetery, and there's a lot going on here. So
it's a beautiful place.
It is, and we're really just lucky to have this. So, anything else that you can think of that we've missed on George or Robin Hood?
I guess not, other than the fact that George was actually a lawyer, but he wanted to be a naturalist, and that's what he became. Yeah. And what he did for Keene is incredible. Yeah. And I was proud to be able to take care of it for the years that I had it. Yeah. Because you knew that with the amount of land he donated and the way he worked the land himself, and everything that he did here within Keene, creating the naturalist societies and things like that, that he was quite a person.
He was. And we really, again, I know I've said this so many times in the show, but look at how nice this area is, and it's like he wanted it to be.
Yeah.
It's not commercialized. I know that the city takes great care in making the decisions for what they have or change up here, and in keeping it safe for everyone, and someplace that everybody's really enjoys coming to. Right. So please come up to Robin Hood if you get a chance. Again, any time of year, you can snowshoe here, you can walk through the trails, swim, play tennis. There's all kinds of things. Yeah. And so we've been in my backyard today. If you're interested in becoming one of our guests, or would like more information about the show, you can email us, and our email address is inmybackyardch8@gmail.com, and we'll try to get back to you and see if we can find a few more topics to talk about. I know that the list is endless, so thank you very much, Brian, for joining us today.
Glad to do it.
I think that Jenna is still out in the woods there trying to find photos, so if we get a chance, we'll run some of these photos for you so you can see where Sunset Rock is. But if you want to get out and enjoy it for yourself, please feel free. Thanks, and we'll be in my backyard.